Hello, Kato.
Hello, Mitch.
Hello, Az.
Who? Who's Az?
Who's Az?
I'm the third host that nobody knows the
That
name
nobody
of.
knows the name
I
of.
am an enigma. The man, the myth, the mystery.
Oh,
AKA.
AKA
Captain Tiny.
Captain Tiny. And you? Who are you?
I'm Kato, AKA Kato.
And I'm Mitch, aka Kung Fu Panzer. And welcome to Beyond the Stars.
This is
Oh.
episode 7.
This is episode 7. What episode are we talking about this week, Kato?
We're discussing episode 7 of Clear Skies, Edge of the Unknown.
Edge of the Unknown. What a ripper title.
Yeah, I know.
I mean,
it's nice.
there's never not been a Ripper title.
I don't know. I don't know
The
about
full
that.
part four.
The pull part 4?
The full part 4 was great. The full part 3, I was like, oh no. So much.
Oh,
And hello to all of our readers in chat. We're sorry
Yes.
that you raided a little bit early. We were not expecting Eric not to ramble.
we were
Quite
expecting
especially.
Eric to be late, which is to be perfectly normal.
Yeah.
Oh, so to jump in, we had
Wait, just to clarify, sorry, someone's saying, do we have folks in video?
we do have video, I believe.
Like, can everybody see us? Like, can people see? Okay, they can't. They can only see the starting now,
That's some nonsense.
unless it's super laggy.
Oh
God,
dear.
yeah, some people have both, some people don't. I would say try refreshing your screen.
Thank you very much for being our remote
A
tech
queen
host.
is never late.
Oh,
Everybody
but Geek Out,
else
can you hear
is
us?
simply.
Yeah, maybe Geek Outs can see us, but then we're just like,
Yeah.
but we should just for a moment just not talk. I was like,
Yeah.
All right, it seems to be working for. Okay, so Geek Outs can see and hear.
okay, beautiful.
Okay, so hopefully.
Oh yeah, so this is Marvin.
This is Marvin.
He's named now.
He's our customer experience manager. If you have any
No.
complaints, please direct them to him.
It's a
Okay.
powered seal android.
All right, to jump in at the top of the episode, we had some stellar makeup and some lack of makeup, which is okay.
Right.
The full spectrum of
The
human
full
emotion.
spectrum of human emotion.
Oh my gosh! But the I love the sort of soft seal, like the soft soul bounding that Sam is doing. Like I think Amy Dallin really sort of premiered that concept on Shield of Tomorrow, playing a blue-skinned Andorian character, wearing a bit of blue lipstick, kind of getting a subtle hint. And obviously Sam, playing a green Andorian, was giving us that same kind of hinting at the shades that their skin tone would be. Because it's very difficult to get foundation in green.
It would be very difficult to get green foundation, but people do it. Like people do Ford cosplays.
Also,
Yeah.
Wicked exists.
And Wicked
Fun
exists.
fact: the shade of green that is used it's produced by MAC, as in the makeup
Yeah.
company MAC. The shade of green that they use for Wicked, they did not have to create because that shade in MAC already existed.
But I guess the question is the variation in Orion skin tone significant enough that there are like Orions at one end of the spectrum that are less well represented in Orion makeup companies who are like, I can never get foundation in my color. Like people there's always like foundation for the lighter skin that
You're just too
Orions, but
verdant.
never
You're just
for
too
my-
verdant.
yeah. It is not easy being green.
Oh, it's not
Um,
easy being green, but it was great. I half expect in about 2 months Sam to just rock up full green.
That would be amazing.
Just one day, just be
One
like,
day.
bonk.
Yeah. The other thing we had, obviously, at the top of the episode was like Aki's kind of
Oh.
overwhelmingly heartfelt and touching
Wow.
tribute to Katherine Johnson. Just way to start the stream off crying before Eric had even done anything. It was such
wonderful.
a touching kind of expression of
Did
how
do
much
a
she
little
meant to so
did
many
do a
people.
little
Yeah.
weep.
I think for anyone who's not familiar, Kato, who was she?
So she was one of the black women who was part of the first mission to the moon. So she did a lot of programming and work around sort of getting the shuttle sort of there. I do not understand how getting a shuttle to the moon works. I'll be honest. I can't give you any specific details. But she did a lot of the sort of the basic coding and program writing, is my understanding at least.
Yeah.
And because there has been a massive shift in the last sort of 50 years about whether or not coding is seen as a prestigious or otherwise job, it was very much a sort of menial task that was given to sort of to women and people of color particularly, and women of color especially. But she is a really fantastic mathematician and scientist who advanced us a little bit further into space. Not that we've got.
A tragic loss, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, yeah. At 101, I think that's a good innings, you would say.
It's a fairly good
Uh,
innings. You've turned up. You're good.
Yeah, she definitely made a huge contribution, and her the effects of kind of her work will continue to be felt for many years to come.
Yeah.
So
And it's also really nice that it's when somebody gets to 101, it's one of those things where unfortunately everybody dies and death is kind of an inevitability. So it's really good that particularly when somebody reaches that age, you have so much to celebrate and that you can talk about and think about how much of a fantastic influence they are and will continue to be, rather than mourn the loss of a life cut too short.
Exactly.
yeah. Okay, so with all of that in mind, speaking of, I guess, life's cut too short. One of the sort of like the nice little scenes that doesn't tie in so well to the overall plot of the episode, but was a nice little aside, was a scene between Tech and Captain Soul.
Oh, it was so lovely.
Yeah. So it turns out they have history.
We do.
History with a capital H.
Yeah, significant history. And this is like a really nice moment where we get to see sort of like Tech opening up about kind of how he's been acting and some of the things that he is like specifically sort of worried about. Like he is here specifically because he promised his brother he would get out. And we get a little bit more information kind of just in the side notes of that discussion that Reiko was a nurse, which probably explains why Macrel is familiar with him and why Macrel knows him from the war. But we actually see that like Tech is like actively scared of space, and he is actively struggling with his fear of what they've been confronting. Even in the last kind of couple of episodes on the journey from Earth, he is not comfortable out here, and he is adjusting to that in a really significant way.
I really, really enjoyed the start of this scene.
Mm.
And it was a really important moment, and from a leadership perspective for Azri was Tech being very, very clear, being, can I please talk to Azri?
Mm.
And then that kind of like, okay, we put the apron on. I'm no longer the captain. I am your sous chef in this mechanical kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
Let's chat.
Yeah. There's a lot of really good like sort of substance here. Like it defines their relationship in a way that kind of says like Azri knew this person before this. Azri knew this person before they sort of came to be on the Ross, and probably handpicked them and knew about their history and sort of chose them for this mission. Which I think we see reflected in a later discussion with Lacat, is that
Yeah, of course.
Lacat was thinking of giving up Starfleet and leaving, and Azri convinced her not to. So like we see that for the junior officers particularly, both of them were uncomfortable, vulnerable, not fitting in with Starfleet, and thinking about giving it up. And Azri is the one who has pushed them to come all the way out here in the name of sort of science and exploration and furthering Starfleet's goals, which is really interesting to have. So like a captain who is so explicitly mentoring two of the junior officers and is so explicitly going, no, I want you here. Like, you are here for a very specific reason, which is that I have chosen you.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting to see that in two very different ways, I think, between the two of them. And I agree, like, there's a lot across this whole episode about defining the difference between a relationship you have with a superior officer, a commander, and a relationship you have with a friend. So you see that, not quite to the same way, but you see that with Exio and Prahl when they have their counseling discussion. There's another neat parallel in that Exio changes her uniform color, and Prahl ends that scene saying, you can call me Yuri in here instead of Prahl, because this is a more personal relationship. And I think obviously like there's a huge complexity in like command structures and hierarchies of power. There's a huge amount of potential. If you have a close personal relationship with a senior, there is always that risk that it will be abused. Like power does corrupt, and so there's always this sort of interesting question of like, you know, the most junior effectively officer on the ship, the person who is not even an officer but is an enlisted like sort of petty chief petty officer, master chief petty officer. So a really senior enlisted sort of crew person, but not on the officer track, who is outranked by the lowliest of ensigns, quote unquote. Like there's a huge amount of potential for that relationship with a captain to be manipulated. And obviously, I don't think that either Soul or Exio are kind of like going down that path or would intentionally do that. But I think it's always good to be conscious of the sort of the power dynamics at play, and there's a risk that these very personal relationships with senior staff, between the senior staff, particularly with the top two command team, are tinged with slightly different expectations.
I think we kind of ended the conversation with a very really positive message from Sol, which is just reintroducing that theme we're seeing over and over again of the kind of unorthodox and non-standard
non-captain captaining,
non-regulation. There's more than one way to be Starfleet.
Yeah, and I think that is definitely something they are so clearly here to explore. They're here to explore the notion of what a good Starfleet officer looks like, even just fundamentally. And so like it very much is one of those things where there is clearly a theme being built here. There is clearly an attitude being built here, and I like seeing it come up in lots of different ways. And I like particularly seeing from this scene how tech fits into that question of like, what is the right way to be Starfleet? Because you wouldn't expect that someone who is so afraid of space would be such a good officer. I do want to just address Geek Out's last question in chat.
Yeah.
Technically, an ensign outranks a Master Chief. It would not happen in real life, as far as I know, because the huge difference in experience between the most junior trained officer, commissioned officer, and the most senior non-commissioned officer is so massive that it just wouldn't happen without there being severe consequences and a lot of learning. It's like an 18-year-old cadet turning to a 45-year-old who's been in the military their entire life and saying, hey, technically I can order you around, so do this for me, which would absolutely not happen. That's not to say it's never happened and it's never been tried by ensigns who feel that they have got that power.
Yeah.
But it is not. The relationship is not in reality that unequal.
It's a very classic case of just because you could doesn't mean you should.
You should absolutely not.
Yeah, and I can imagine if an ensign was to try and pull rank on an MCPO, even if it worked in the present, they would face some serious consequences from some seniors down the line. Though again, I'm not a military person, so
I think the point is it's something that Tech is conscious of. Tech is conscious that technically all the ensigns that he's ordering around outrank him. Like Tech is aware that being a non-commissioned officer, he doesn't have the same training in command necessarily, and he doesn't have the same potential for advancement that all of the ensigns do. And he is conscious of his position. Like, the fact that his seniority and his experience would give him a huge amount of clout separate of the defined rank structure, that kind of doesn't matter if it's something he's self-conscious of. If he's not confident in the way that he can act around it, that's going to reflect how he orders the ensigns around. Like, that's reflecting in this insecurity that he's expressing. That I think wouldn't be the case if the chief engineer was a commander or a lieutenant commander and had that background. But
it's going to be a fascinating thing to explore, especially with the relationship with Lakat growing as it is.
Mm-hmm.
But we learned a little bit more about Azuri, the person, versus Azuri, the captain, in that they like getting their hands dirty in some engineering works.
Yeah, which I can respect. I think a lot of spying, Azuri is very explicitly built on this sort of counterintelligence background. A lot of that is going to be hacking and improvising. Like, I can picture Azuri as kind of a more straightforward and sensible go-go gadget. Like, there is an element to being a spy that is dealing with systems you're not familiar with, taking stuff that you don't necessarily, you haven't been sort of brought on to understand, unfamiliar technology, and pretending you can work your way around it. And I think that the engineering perspective there has a huge amount of value to Azuri's sort of former role in counterintelligence, as much as the sort of the command style thing of having enough presence to talk your way into and out of situations to be able to make bald-faced lies at people. I can see engineering being a really useful backup for a spy.
Oh, absolutely. Especially the whole... It's MacGyver.
Yeah, and it's a really interesting perspective for a captain, because I think we see different styles and attitudes in captains across the sort of the various series. Like I think you can say like Picard especially is a very command-led, diplomacy-led captain in lots of the ways his stories are told, and he's got a bit of sort of scientific background in archaeology and sort of history, which are very sort of classical arts sciences in lots of ways. And you contrast to that with Janeway, who is about science and exploration and experimentation, which is sort of how Voyager gets to survive. But I don't think we've necessarily seen the engineering side of things. Like Janeway has been exploring a little bit out of necessity, a little bit about she wants to discover some new things, she wants to get the science of it. But having an engineering perspective, I'm interested to see what that does to a captain as far as how they interact with a ship, how they interact with challenges, what the solution they go for is. Is it increased understanding like the scientist? Is it talking your way out of it like the diplomatic? Is it let's build something that will give us this advantage, like this edge? And I'm curious to see how that all plays out. Obviously, that's a massive oversimplification.
Oh, obviously, but also in conjunction with the technical testbed that is the Ross.
Yeah.
So giving someone who's got that understanding, got that capability within engineering, this new technology to play and go wild with. And yeah, it's going to be really fascinating to see how that happens. There is one extra thing I want to note before we get into the more crunchy bit of this scene. The way Xander exited the dialogue and went back into the tech babble, perfect. Like the way he timed it, and like it was like it was supernatural. Like they were having a conversation, and then a word triggered an idea, which then triggered a conversation, which then triggered the scene wipe out of the situation. And like, it was so very.
It was
perfect.
very smooth.
A lot of this episode has really been demonstrating the smoothness that we can have with these sort of shows. Like there are very few roles in this episode. It is a very sort of like mechanically light thing, and that is because there is such a beautiful integration all the way through of lots of really brilliant scenes between lots of different people, and I'm really enjoying that sort of like perspective. So, on that, we need to talk a little bit.
Taylor can have a crunch.
A little bit.
Extended tasks.
A little bit about extended tasks.
It's one of my favorite mechanics.
It's really cool.
I think Xander is doing them quite right. I would like someone to check how Xander thinks they work.
That is a very polite drag.
Or he's explaining it poorly. And I don't want to say it's definitely one of those. And it's a complicated enough mechanic, and it's a complicated enough thing that particularly with the pressure upstream and performing and all this other sort of stuff, like there is time pressure, there is the liveness, it is very difficult to explain to an audience what you're doing while you're also making the rolls and doing the calculations in your head. So I don't want to say it's absolutely that he's 100% wrong. It may just be that it was not communicated entirely sort of sensibly to me as an audience member. So, when you succeed on a check during an extended task, you get to roll to see how much work you do. The number of dice you roll is determined by the two things. One, just the base thing, it is 2. And then it is another number that is determined by what department you're using. This is an engineering task Xander was doing. His engineering score should be 4. It would be 5, but I believe that tech has untapped potential, which means that none of his skills can be higher than 4. So he must have... Yeah, he has a maximum of 4 in his things. Probably engineering is his highest because he is
presumably.
The best engineer.
It's security.
That's just how... that's just logical. So it should be 2 plus 4, which is 6. I don't think that is the number of effect dice he was rolling. Neither last week nor this week. And also, the number of dice you roll is not equal to the work you've done. So if you roll 5 dice, that doesn't mean you have done 5 work. That is not a breakthrough. You could roll 5 dice and get no work produced. You could roll 5 dice and get 10 work produced, which would be 2 breakthroughs. Because of the way that Star Trek affects dice work, which is that there are sides where there's nothing, there's sides where there's 1, there's sides where there's 1 and an effect, and there's sides where there's 2.
Yeah.
So he should be rolling more than 4 dice, which is what I think he rolled this episode. He should be rolling 6. And then that should determine how much work is actually generated, which is the actual determinant of the break. Oh my gosh, I'm so boring. As has decided to leave. Just you and me.
They pulled their microphone off them.
I stood up to put my empty tea mug down, stood on the mic, and it broke. Classic as move.
I think the main thing is we don't want Tech to undersell his ability.
Yeah, like I think this is the thing. Like I normally wouldn't call it out if it's like, oh no, Tech is too powerful. Tech is doing it too well. Like whatever. Like that's fine. Tech is probably not doing as well as he could be doing. On the other hand, when we did get around to sort of spending momentum to reduce resistance, it is spend 1 momentum to remove 2 resistance, and there were 3 resistance on this task in total, and I think they spent 1 and removed all 3, which is technically that's 1 resistance too many. So they generated 1 more work than they should have with that resistance. But again, that's better for the players, so I'm not as bothered by that.
Yeah.
But it's just, one of those things. The extended task rules are not easy to understand. They're not necessarily laid out in the most sort of straightforward way. They're a little bit chunky as a mechanic.
We need a flowchart. That's what we need.
Go through that and check.
A flowchart would be very nice.
I would be grateful. Even if it was just, no, Kato, you're wrong. Xander is doing it right. Shut up.
Or it could be that they've made some modifications to make extended tasks run quicker.
Yeah, which is very possible. Though obviously this extended task is an actually really good use of the extended task, which is that it is not going to last across one scene or even just one episode. This is very clearly something that is being worked on for the future.
Also, what are they doing with the extended task? We forgot to mention that.
Oh yeah, they're trying to work out how the chip that was in that one Romulan's brain that is broken and he's now dying. They're trying to stop
Romulan. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. You know the Romulan, the true Romulan.
The Romulan.
Yeah. Yeah, that one. Yeah. But yeah, that's one of those things where, like, obviously this is a task that is going to take multiple days at least to work on. It is a really good thing that they have started rolling because you can't finish until you start. So it is good that they have started the ball rolling in that specific arena, because hopefully we will get to the point where we can sort of say this has worked or it's failed or we need more information.
Perfect. And so the thing is, Kato, it is less than 20 episodes and we are in sight of Narendra Station.
We're so close. We touched it this episode.
We did touch it this episode with feet and everything.
Yeah, I know. I really am excited about this. I'm glad that Prowl is being the no fun dad and being like, nope. This Romulan who is not a Trill, this Trill who's definitely not a Romulan pretending to be a Trill, is not leaving the ship no matter what. I really appreciated also Azuri reinforcing that with the threat to work out how to keel-haul someone on a starship if this goes wrong. Keel-hauling, if you're not familiar, is a really, really nasty
It's like the most horrible thing you can do to a person.
It is one of the worst things you can do to a person. You pass a line under your ship while you're moving at speed, and then you pass them along the line so that they pass under the entirety of the ship and are scraped along the keel. And, that's underwater,
die.
And it's painful, and it kills people a lot, and it is a nasty, nasty traditional punishment from traditional sailing ships.
Exactly.
Now, the upsides of doing it in space are, there isn't any water pressure,
but there's just no air.
Definitely no air.
They're definitely gonna die.
Pros, cons.
Yeah.
Pros, cons. They die quicker.
You can actually survive for about 30 seconds in space. So it depends how quickly they're keel-hauled around the ship and brought back inside.
It depends how quick the spaceship is moving.
Yeah, can you imagine keel-hauling somebody at like warp 9?
Even impulse power is obnoxiously quick.
Yeah, like impulse power is a fraction of light speed, and even like a quarter of light speed is
look at the new comment in chat because that's delightful.
Skin exfoliating technique, Jesus.
It is very effective.
No,
the skin is all gone.
Yeah, the skin is definitely gone.
I mean, like, what if the shields are up? There are so many questions.
There's so many questions, but to be fair, Sol did say they're going to figure out how to do this.
Yeah,
they don't know yet how to do this.
Like the other barrier is that traditional sailing ships are not that wide. Like even if you are keel-hauling over like one of the warp nacelles as opposed to across the
the whole saucer section.
The saucer section is massive.
Yeah, it's just a little bit
huge. This is we're talking several football stadiums, and that is significantly bigger. Anyway, I appreciated it as a threat. I do not recommend it as a disciplinary measure.
It was a very good senior talking to their juniors this will happen to you if you fuck up. It was perfect.
It was a very much so help me.
Yeah.
It was not necessarily an actual threat. So,
Also, just quickly, Geek Outs. His favorite mechanic is spending threat to ruin days. Because look at he's angry.
he's unnecessarily, like, harsh.
Oh, yeah. I've played with him. He's terrible.
Okay. So we got some familiar faces
How
out here.
dare you? He's like, God, who's Nick Offerman? He just looks grumpy. That's just his face. He's a very kind and forgiving game master. You've clearly been pissing him off.
Speaking, that is not unexpected for Mitch.
Yeah.
Speaking of familiar faces,
Mitch
so
is just there like, I am going to cause problems on purpose.
A little bit.
Yeah. So
Familiar faces.
Yes. Familiar faces.
Familiar, unfamiliar faces.
I say, trying to get us back on track. Again. So there is the Thunderchild, the Akira class that is sort of the default setting ship that is always at Narendra. That is captained by one Victor Navarro, who I've never heard of, and definitely no idea what that's about. There's also an Intrepid, which is quite exciting.
Apparently, Captain Navarro is a very handsome Mexican man, though.
Apparently. And the Intrepid is the Johnson, run by one Amelia Dalton, whose name I cannot say correctly. Not
Amelia Dalton?
Amelia Dalton, who could that possibly be?
I think it's an Andorian that was raised on Earth.
Uh-huh.
Anyway,
Not sure. We'll have to see.
other people that you might remember, but not quite in this way, are Admiral Hebert, also known as Hebert.
Hebert, aka Haber, aka Herbert, aka so many different interpretations on the name.
Herbert.
Yeah.
Herbert.
Yes. The Admiral, who we all know and love, who's been in previous episodes, and we will no doubt continue to see. And the other familiar face that was a bit interesting was Prowl's Vulcan X. And I mean Prowl's Vulcan X.
Yeah, to clarify, it is
Vulcan X.
Yeah, the previous host's
Prowl's
ex-partner.
X. Yeah. So that was that. And then there were some actually new faces.
Yes. There was also Kargan.
Yeah, okay, sorry. And Kargan.
And Kargan. Ugh.
Yeah. that is very much how he is. That is his character.
Kargan, disgusted noise.
Yeah. And some new faces. So the RRW Imperius.
Oh.
The big new Diderodex class warship.
It's so good, Kato.
Kato, I am very concerned about this fucking singularity.
It's fine.
It's the
fine.
coolest.
They're all like
It's
that.
not a real singularity.
It's
Mitch and I, when this episode played and we were sat there watching it, and Eric was like, yeah, it's powered by an artificial black hole, we had literally opposite reactions. Mitch was like, that's so cool, and I'm like, oh my god, they're going to kill everyone.
I mean,
Classic Romulan nonsense.
This is classic. Like, if you want to watch the new Star Trek 2009, like, there is some use of the singularity kind of stuff in there with their Romulan ships. Realistically, the most important thing is if they have a singularity core breakdown, the people that it is going to hurt the most are the Romulans.
Yes.
Like, it will be everyone else's problem because they will have created a singularity. But, like, realistically, it is just a problem for the Romulans at first, and it is on them to make sure they don't destroy the galaxy by creating a black hole.
They have to make their ships off-world, right?
Well, yeah, but like the Federation makes their ships off-world. That's not as huge.
Yeah, but like, just
further.
Just so far away.
A little bit further away.
Please, not close to the planet. Please, we're begging you.
I love that we have what is essentially the counterpart of the Ross from the Romulan fleet. This Type 2 Diderodex testbed with all the technology that Romulus have developed throughout the Dominion War, both by interacting with the Dominion and on their own. Oh boy, there's going to be some juicy, juicy stuff in that thing.
She is hot.
Oh, she's the best. I
am just saying, chat. If anyone wanted to draw the RW Imperius and the USS Ross, either as humans or as themselves, in a romantic relationship, I would not be against that.
You
'Cause they
wouldn't.
are both
Okay.
pretty sexy, but
They're
the
pretty hot.
Imperious, just like the sleek, like the dark beetle-like sheen. It's such a good look.
And the green Kato.
Yeah, it's that like, but the beetle metallic, like it. Yeah,
But like the whole like
Romulans.
the whole.
Romulans are terrible. What they have, most importantly, is an aesthetic.
They have an aesthetic,
They
and
have
I
such
dig
an aesthetic.
so much that it's the fucking color of their own blood, which is just the most metal bullshit that you. I mean, literally, that they could ever have done, and I adore it. I have already been vocal about the fact that I'm not a huge fan of Federation Starship design.
It is very the good guys, the Federation.
Oh,
Starship
I'm just
design.
like, oh, you look so boring with your circles and your straight lines and your.
Because they're good. Like they are very much the apple of future Starship design.
Shaped like a friend.
Shaped
Yeah,
like a
like,
friend,
that
just
is-
with giant cannons.
You guys are so cute.
That is why it exists.
Can every episode of Beyond the Stars from now on just be me here like this? Just listening to you guys talk
Yeah.
forever
I think
about
this
Romulan
episode-
aesthetics.
this episode I graduated to shipping actual starships, so that's a new thing.
Shipping square.
It was only a matter of time.
It was.
But it's one of those things where I'm like, yeah, it's like that fucking line in Order of the Phoenix where he's like, he might be on the run, but you've got to admit Dumbledore's got style. And it's like,
Oh.
yeah, the Romulans killed a lot of people, but boy howdy, it's pretty.
I think we've
Yeah.
already seen just how powerful the Ross can be.
Mm.
It's just like, imagine that, but also it can go invisible.
I should mention the D-Dex is a scale higher than the Ross, I believe.
I think
so-
mechanically it is a touch higher, a touch larger.
So one scale higher. So a little bit bigger and a little bit meaner.
And I think
so
as
the
fr-
Romulans have this beautiful sleek aesthetic.
They do.
Do you know who doesn't have a beautiful sleek aesthetic?
Is it the Klingons?
Yeah, they are a little bit more kind
Rustic.
of make do and mend. Bolt this onto this. Here's the ship. It's about getting as fast as I can to the next fight. Really beautiful.
To be fair, that is still an aesthetic.
Yeah.
And
It
it's
is
an
an
aesthetic that I still like more than I do the Federation aesthetic.
That's. I'm not saying that's wrong. What I'm saying is the Romulans have the best aesthetic.
Oh, cut your eyes on that ship by looking at it.
The Romulans have a great aesthetic. What the Klingons are not famous for having, apart from aesthetic, is great medical care, which is why it is a little bit concerning that the head of medical on the station is Dr. Naria, I think?
Naria, I think it was.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, that's also very interesting because this is the kind of unity between technologies and education and understanding. This may be an outlier, as per is usual for Clear Skies.
Yeah. It's also interesting because we know Macrel. Macrel likes a Klingon.
Macrell's gonna throw down.
Macrel is into some Klingons. Macrel is all about this, and I'm interested in seeing what Macrel does with, like, a Klingon counterpart to relate to on the station. I'm really interested in seeing more of Macrel plus Klingons, how combative that gets, how flirty that gets, because that is basically the same thing when it comes to Klingons.
It depends on depends on your tone
It does.
and how much blood has been drawn.
Yes. So that's the most brief aside we can possibly do about Klingons. Let us
They're
get
so great.
back to our Romulans.
We get back
because
to our Romulans with an absolutely delightful ambassador.
He's great, isn't he?
He's such a-
Ambassador Hugino.
Hugino is a fascinating Romulan.
I love this very much.
Like,
Yeah.
the first up, we know historically Romulans are double talkers. They are generally quite firm. And then we have this overwhelmingly kind and, like, good-natured Romulan. So far
Yeah.
from our perspective.
Yeah,
He may
yeah,
be
I mean,
horrible. I'm hoping
is
he's
like-
horrible.
Whenever we talk about Romulans, just infer from the fact we are having a discussion that we have added the phrase, but of course, it could be the Romulans playing us in order to do some weird Romulan nefarious stuff.
This
Just
is
add
a
that
40-year
phrase
con.
to every sentence. Because
Yeah.
what is happening basically is that this ambassador has requested the embassy to be established on Narendra Station for the Romulans. And Kargan is like personally offended. Narendra Station is the site of a great sort of like Romulan attack on the Klingons. There's a huge reason why it would be sort of like culturally insensitive to let them in.
Also, attack is probably an understatement. It was kind of a massacre.
Yeah, okay, and the Federation came and helped. Like, it is a really crucial turning point as far as Klingon Federation relationships getting better, but does not really enamor the Klingons to the Romulans at all.
No.
And we see this go through several stages in this episode, because we have this sort of first meeting with Hebert on the Ross, where we have kind of people throwing out different things, like, is this actually a Romulan tactic to undermine Narendra and the goodwill and the Klingon Federation relationship?
Yeah.
You know, what are we going to do about the fact that we know Romulans have been infiltrating Earth, have got spies everywhere? There might be people who've got chips implanted onto them on the station. How do we sort of scan for that kind of stuff? Like, there was lots of really good, interesting sort of talk here. And eventually they were like, this is a diplomatic problem. Let us send our diplomats to deal with it.
I mean,
shocking.
That's why they're here.
Yeah.
Like, that is... it's like Aki is like, yes, my character's purpose.
Yeah.
Excuse me, whilst I just...
Stand aside! I think this was one of Aki's strongest scenes. Obviously, the thing with Olin so far is that we haven't had much opportunity for Olin to actually diplomat. So, whilst I say that this is one of my favourite and strongest Aki scenes so far, that's also with the caveat of we've also not had many opportunities for Aki to have strong scenes like this for it to compare to.
Absolutely.
It's not that I've disliked any of the previous stuff Aki's done, but obviously every other character realistically has had like proper moments to shine in the episodes we've had so far, whereas we haven't quite had that opportunity for Aki because we've never really had an opportunity to diplomat in such a diplomatic fashion. And so I think this was a really, really powerful, beautiful scene from Aki.
The two scenes. There was the first initial meeting, and then the later on actual diplomacy session as well.
Yeah.
So let's go through them. So like a couple of things jump out at me because Olin takes Prahl with them to go to the Imperius.
A good call.
Yeah. And they leave Patience behind. It's just them and Prahl. Prahl, it turns out, thinks that they're friends, which I am so excited about this relationship. I am so excited about this friendship. I am totally on board.
I think Prahl, is if you're not actively annoying him, you're friends.
Yeah, no, but I think there's something a little bit deeper there. Like, if you see the way Prahl is, like, obviously he's going through a stressful time at the moment for stuff we will come back to, but, like, Prahl has a drink of Romulan ale.
Oh, he does.
With the Romulans. There is a lot about this, but, like, I think Prahl is actually really supportive this whole episode of Olin, and I'm really excited to see Prahl being that supportive character and that go-to character for Olin, because I think Prahl being so stern and so kind of fastidious, he needs a character that he is well inclined to and wants to sort of mentor, and I really like that that's the relationship that is sort of happening, particularly given that Olin has the ability to sense what he's feeling, and obviously is very sort of trustworthy and has demonstrated that they're not going to give that away. But I think having a relationship where you can go, because you could easily be hostile to go, well, you know what I'm feeling and I don't like that. That makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah.
That ruins my like facade of being very sort of stone-faced. But it's actually led to trust between them and sort of a really good working relationship.
Yeah, it's really cool. I think it's also this, and I may be reading into this a bit more than already has been made available, but Olin represents something very different to Prahl. Someone who was on at the end of the war. We found out was part of writing the treaties that came post-Dominion War, and kind of represents this kind of hopefulness, where Prahl is, and we already know, is very, very stuck in this I'm going to leave Starfleet state of mind.
Yeah.
That Prahl didn't make it out of the war. That he's a changed man. I think potentially what we can see with these two characters is that relationship grow, and we find the kindness that is in Prahl.
Yeah, I think diplomacy is obviously the path to Prahl's hope. Like, the path to stopping wars, to stopping him from having to sort of be that violent person that he's fallen back on during the war. And I think I can totally see that. Like, Olin represents a lot for him.
Yeah, because I think what I really like about Prahl is that he says all of, things like Pearl didn't make it out of the war, and he's talking about how he is kind of more callous and hardened since the war. But he's also willing to try and find that person again. A lot of people come out of war and remain irrevocably changed. And that's not saying that it's necessarily better or worse, but Prahl is trying to find that he's trying to put that Prahl to bed. He's trying to let it rest. He's trying to kind of say, we're past the war. I don't have to be so hard anymore. And I think Olin is a really big part of trying to find that again, or at least try and put sad, grisly Prahl to bed.
I do want to say, Prahl is also very obviously a way for Eric to provide support to Aki.
Yeah.
So like at the very end, one of the kind of like buttons for the whole episode was Prahl leaning across after everything has been resolved to like great satisfaction, basically through Olin's work, getting these two parties to come to the table together. Prahl leans across and is like, still think they made a mistake sending you? And I think that is both an expression of like Prahl's support for Olin, but also Eric's support for Aki, because Aki is like a new player coming into a streaming environment, having been like way back in the day, having been a fan on Vast and like talking, like doing what we were doing like analysis and discussion.
Also taking on the face role of the party.
Yeah, like having to grow from that into like someone who is like very explicitly doing this as a job, and like I can see that would come with a lot of kind of nerves and doubt. And so I think it is Eric using Prahl to support Olin as a way of supporting Aki and giving Aki a bit more confidence. Which obviously
but the
they
support
don't really need because they smashed it.
Patience is their service dog. Prahl is their service trill.
Yes.
Which is tops.
Yes,
I think,
but he shouldn't drink on the job.
He probably shouldn't have drunk on the job, but also it's one of those things where it's like stretch, because one, he wasn't actually working in a Federation capacity. It was a neutral capacity. But also like trying to strengthen the relationship between them and the Romulans.
And he's had a hard day.
He's had a hard fucking few months.
He's had a difficult day. So a couple of other things that come out of this meeting. So obviously, like what we get out of this is essentially Olin coordinating a meeting on the Ross.
Yeah.
Sort of, Kargan will not allow Romulans to set on foot on the station. That's a hard boundary he's set. And Olin says, like, kind of just, if we can get these people in a room, we can get the discussion moving, which I think is such a fundamental part of diplomacy. It's just getting two parties to agree to come together and have some discussions and to find a point where they can agree on something, even a small thing, is such a huge sort of starter to more conversation and more concession. It is very easy in negotiation to be like, well, they won't accept any of our demands and we won't accept any of theirs. And until you find that first point of sort of like shared agreement, you are never going to get anywhere. So it's a huge coup for Olin to get this and to say
just one win.
Come to our purpose-built promenade. However, the crucial things that arise apart from that, from the trip to the Imperius, are that there are Reman guards working on the Imperius, and that these guards have rank. So Remans are, as we discussed on one of our like earlier pre-episodes, they are a different species within the Romulan Empire that has traditionally been treated as slaves. They are traditionally really horrifically oppressed, and part of kind of Star Trek Nemesis and part of the sort of like the assassination and Shinzon of the Senate by Shinzon and kind of all of the recent political upheaval in Romulus has been the Remans starting to push for independence and recognition and freedom from slavery. So it's really interesting to see that, and I wonder if this is a truth across the Empire, or if this is just something that is true for the Imperius. If the Imperius is just one of those ships that has, like the Ross, chosen to be a little bit exceptional and accept that more types of people are people.
And it just further reinforces Hugino's character, in that he's an unusual Romulan, I already mentioned, but then he treats his Reman bodyguard with such kindness. And he's always kind of on the front foot with it, like he prefers to be quiet. He likes to just chill in the background. This is okay. He's not a slave. He is here in an official capacity. He is my friend. He's my bodyguard. And then also this desire to want Romulus and the Romulan peoples to change.
Yeah, I think that's crucial. Is like if we take everything he's saying at face value, which, as we've discussed, Romulans,
This is where I've been sat there the whole time, and he's like, "Oh yes, he wants to be here. He, all of this. He's my friend," and I'm like, "Suspicion,
obviously.
Suspicion.
suspicion."
But if we accept what he's saying, which is that, like, there is a huge amount of political upheaval on Romulus. Lots of different parties are making a play. Hogino is part of a group or a more moderate sect that believes that the constant era of fear and suspicion that the Tal Shiar and the Romulan government have been using for so long to oppress the people and to keep them in line is not going to be an effective tool for the future, and that they have to sort of change that and evolve. If that is how Hogino is sort of wanting to present himself, or if that is his position, like, it is great that Remans are a part of that he is, like, very explicitly elevating races that have been less well looked after in Romulan culture than Romulans themselves. And it contrasts very directly to Sela and this kind of, like, deeply embedded in the Tal Shiar and the espionage aspect of Romulus, and all of the subterfuge that we've seen demonstrated from the Romulans on Earth and these sort of spy rings. So I think it is nice and interesting to see this contrast and to see this Romulan who's presented in a totally different way. Now, it could be a different mask of the same face, or it could genuinely be a reflection of the fact that Romulan society has fractured and is now moving towards being a little bit more like the Klingon Empire, in that when you meet a Klingon, you don't know what house they're working for, so you don't know how they will feel towards you. That may be where we're kind of going with Romulan ships, in that different groups will have different sort of warbirds, and that will reflect on how they feel.
Thankfully, Klingons, as already stated by Hebert, was they're very obvious about the things that they do, the things that they are. That generally, if you're not sure which house a Klingon is working with, you just look at their chest and it's drawn on.
Yeah. The Romulans, less straightforward.
Whilst we're on this subject, I want to talk about Eric in this scene, because there is nothing I love more than GMs being NPCs talking to NPCs.
Yeah.
Because when it's like house games, it's hilarious, because one time I got one of my GMs to flirt with himself.
Nice.
He had to seduce himself. It was delightful. But when it comes down to things like Eric, it is just a masterclass in how... Because Eric doesn't have the same kind of accent or voice. He does, obviously there are different voices for character, but the range he has is more limited than, say, someone like Matthew Mercer, whose entire career is built out of doing different voices, which makes sense. But what I love about watching Eric play two different NPCs is, even if the voices are not particularly different, and they're just different enough that you can kind of tell that there's two people, the body language is insane. The subtle shifts he makes between the two characters, it's like he's two different people. I mean, and I know that's the, Patrick Stewart.gif acting, but at the same time, it's so subtle in certain ways, and like sometimes even his hand gestures will switch based on whether he's himself or a character or another character, and you can kind of see Eric as Eric the narrator versus Eric in character.
You know what it is? It's the sneer on Kargan. That's just like that foul look on his face.
It's like very good with a capital V and a capital G, but it's something I love watching Eric, and it's something that as an actor I have taken notes, because he is a master at this and he does it a lot. And with his different NPCs, you can see that there are very specific tics and body language, and it's something, not that it was in this scene, but it's something he does when he Jaegers his players.
Yeah.
Is he will adopt their body language and their mannerisms and their speech patterns, and it is just so mind-blowing to watch that you forget how subtle the changes are because of how much of a difference it makes to the characters that he's playing. And you're like, oh yeah, they're like totally different people, and then all he's done is like straighten his back slightly, and it's wild. Okay, I'm done.
Utterly tops.
I do want to add into that, like, it is also, he is presenting two different arguments and presenting them both as reasonable and understandable from the point of view of the different cultures that are coming to the table. because like it is not just that he is talking to himself and like playing two parts in a play. It is that he is off the cuff coming up with the arguments to respond to himself and having both sides of a debate, which like is hard enough when
you're only
doing
on
it
one
in real
side.
life with prep. But from the point of view of two fictionalized characters in a sort of future universe where like lots of different stuff has changed, to be like, but of course you will remember, like, this is really good rhetoric and this is really good sort of debate. And it's just like the beautiful sort of cut of reparations are made in blood. Whose would you like? As kind
whose
of like
blood?
combat.
Whose blood?
He's like,
And then
it is really beautiful.
The chills.
But also the way that he phrased that interaction was that whose blood, and then he would shift back into Kargan, being off put, pausing, and then whose blood, and then back to Kargan, pausing, whose blood.
Oof.
It's really
It's
beautiful.
just like chef's kiss.
One thing I want to highlight about this whole scene, and we've said it a couple of times before, and it's continuing to happen. There is this confidence that Azri has in the capability of their crew.
Azri fronts so hard.
Azri is everybody's like top tier wingman.
But also, delegation is so important.
Yeah.
In this size of a crew.
But also delegation in general is a quality in leadership that people often forget. Because people assume that being a leader means you do everything. And it's absolutely not. It's kind of it's macro-managing and going, you deal with that, you deal with that, you deal with that, then we'll report back and collaborate. You can't do everything. And when you're a leader, you have to fight the instinct to try and control everything. And you have to have that faith to be able to be an effective leader, which is what I love so much about Azri, is that delegation is one of their like key attributes. Is to be like, okay, I trust you to go and do that. I'm not going to watch. All you need to do is report back at the end, because whatever you do will be the right choice. It's fantastic.
I think we get both from Azri in this scene on the ship where we like finally have this meeting. We have both Azri as the captain fronting at Kargan and at Higino, because like having a meeting on your ship does make you vulnerable, and it makes you sort of open to judgment and interpretation. And Azri presents such a strong, powerful sort of captainly role as they are being that person, and they don't take like anything from anyone. Like when Kargan tries to sort of like intimidate them, they're like, no, this is my ship. Like, you know, they don't take anything. They don't make apologies. They don't need to. They're just like, no. Like, this is how it is. These are the facts. No biggie. But they also just have such a confident presence for Olin. Like, you see that in the way that, like, they 100% trust Olin and the way Olin plays this scene. And you see that at the end when Kargan storms out, that, like, Kargan rises to his feet and there is increased tension in the room. And Azri, sort of like the consummate security professional with all of this intelligence training, doesn't move. Because you can tell they have a read on the scene and they are confident that they aren't afraid of Kargan here. And it is such a power play.
And Olin fucking nailed it. And Azri's like, yeah, you fucking nailed that.
Yeah.
You got this.
They're
You
such
make
a
him
great
wait for
team for diplomacy.
You got this, Olin. Make him wait for it. Boom.
So that's everyone apart from Aki. Like, we have already talked about, like, Aki knocks it out of the park this episode. This is such a great episode to finally sort of highlight them.
The monologue.
Like, if you had any doubt about, like, Aki being able to bring it at the level of this Dreampunks, which, like, you absolutely should not have had that doubt.
No.
But if you did, you do not have it anymore. You cannot have it anymore. Aki has killed diplomacy as a scene, as a challenge, and that is one of the hardest things, to formulate well-reasoned arguments that sound like they are coming out of the mouth of a professional diplomat as improv, that are reasonable and like advance your point. That is hard stuff, and Aki has absolutely nailed it. Like,
yes,
because
it's like the ever present problem of trying to roleplay somebody who has knowledge in a field wildly out of your own.
Yeah.
So it would be me like trying to roleplay somebody in physics. Like, I have a very, very solid and secure biology knowledge. I could theoretically pass as playing either a scientist or a medical professional relatively well. But if someone tried to put me in like theoretical physics or quantum mechanics, and I tried to kind of like improv that, it would be very difficult. And that, like, you know, or trying to play a character that's wittier than you or more intelligent than you, it's very difficult. When you're writing a novel, obviously you can sit down and, like, if you think of a witty comeback for the argument that you've got written 3 weeks after you started writing the argument, it just goes in and it doesn't matter. But when you're role playing that in the moment, it is very, very difficult. And Aki has it's honestly kind of like jaw dropping how well they sold this. It's one of those, obviously, again, like, that's the whole point of roleplay, is to, like, you know, Patrick Stewart don't get acting, but to to kind of sit and watch this scene and think less, these are people role-playing at a table that I am watching, and I am watching a diplomat mediate a meeting between a Klingon and a Romulan, there is a very thin line that it is hard to get across.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's one major thing I want to highlight from Aki's performance, in that there is a way that politicians speak. And it's very deliberate, and it also has a slow and consistent rhythm that is very hard to do without extreme focus. And Aki is consistently doing that. And when you're role-playing, there is this tendency to want to just, like, kind of get it all out. Like, you've got all these ideas, you've got these big choices you want to make, so it just comes out and bursts forth. But Aki was patient, pardon the pun, and consistent in that delivery, in the way that a politician needs to be. That calm under pressure, this almost like soporific voice in the room that de-escalates naturally and allows the good relationships to thrive.
Absolutely. I think, like, the Amy Dallin Award for, like,
services to roleplay.
Yeah, well, for services to particularly, like, one-liners in roleplay, I just want to highlight, like, so much of what Aki said was so golden, particularly for, like, off-the-cuff sort of, like, roleplay, but, like, we are rebuilding. We have an opportunity to tell our ghosts to rest. They've found their glory. What will history and songs say it to you and yours? And it's like, what a great encapsulation of, like, again, like you said, absolute power delivery on it, but then also, like, that is such a Klingon way to ask someone to change their attitude and change their behavior. And it obviously gets to Kargan. He is not happy about this, but he makes the concession, and we get this sort of victory. And it is like, yes, absolutely, that is beautiful. Like, that is beautiful writing. Even like, it is roleplay, but that is beautifully well written, and you could put that in a novel. That is really tops. And it's always great when you get that in role playing.
And I think the thing I really liked about that line is that it smashed the pitch that Eric threw.
Yes.
With the whose blood?
Yeah.
And then it was like, okay, let's wait for it.
You got this, Olin. Make him wait for it. Boom.
And yeah, because it is that reflection of Klingons with the whose blood, is like they're gone now. It's time to move on. It is time to grow. And I'm like, nah.
All right.
Let us talk a couple of lighter things before we wrap up.
Yes.
So we are in port, which means you have to give tours of your fancy new ship.
Yes, you do. To the Admiral.
Those poor people.
Especially when you've got a technical test bed on your hands.
Yes. Sam has been nailing oh yeah, I remember that. That sucks so much. Oh no. I hate ship inspections so much. I hate them so much. I hate getting senior people on board and being like, oh yes, let us look at the thing. It is so stressful.
Potato.
I have had to do captain's tours when the captain comes around and is like, is this clean? Like, you follow all the department heads around and they, like, brush the top of every fire extinguisher and go, have you dusted on here? Have you checked every little, like, place? Is everything as tidy? And it's like, so stressful.
Kato, the white glove of doom.
And yes, literally the white glove of doom. Absolutely. White glove. Doom. And then on top of that, an admiral, like any senior person higher than your captain. I feel Ren so much on the, like, I must clean my room.
It was good.
It sucks so much. It is the worst part. Still going, like, escape while you can is just so, like, oh yeah, that is such a ship mood, being like, oh yeah, sure, leave. But before she'll leave the horrible ship tour inspection, like, hybrid monster, escape, run away, any other job you can be doing. Start a fire somewhere else on the ship if you have to go deal with that.
Yeah.
I don't care. Get out if you can. Other than that, obviously, like, Hey Bear is great. She's still, like, as pro-exploring as we'd expected her, yada, yada, yada. She does mention that synths are being brought to Narendra to cover personnel gaps, because no one likes being out here. And if you've been watching Star Trek Picard, that might make you go,
I have not.
Okay, well, it might make you go,
I do want to...
what that will mean.
Yeah, who knows what that will mean? But I also really did like the interaction between Sol and the Admiral, being like, we didn't get Exio without the first holograms.
Yeah.
But, like, you might not like the synths, but they are an opportunity for life.
Yeah, I think that was great. I don't know to what extent they're going to address Picard directly. I think it would be a mistake to do it too much, because I think Picard is very much, like, if Picard doesn't answer those questions itself, what is it even doing as a show, really? But it was a nice way to kind of, like, undercut that and go, like, no, this is bigoted. Like, you know, humans did not start out as humans. We evolved from things. Other types of species, other types of life are capable of evolving. You don't get to just dismiss them out of hand. We have already talked about Prowl and the wonderful moments with Exio. Gina does an amazing job at being a counselor. I do want to highlight from that one specific thing. Prowl's former host was called Myrek, and Myrek's boyfriend was called Cyrek.
I mean, they had to be together.
Eric, why?
Listen, they met each other and went, well, it's clearly meant to be.
No. I wonder how many people felt called out by Myrek being into emotionally distant men. Like, everyone's bad relationship is emotionally distant men.
You doing okay, sweetie?
Listen, I am very glad that I am now with an emotionally available man, but I have done my time.
Yeah, we have all worked there at the mines of the emotionally distant man, chipping away at his emotionally distant facade, hoping to find some deep well of
some deep vein of emotion in the emotionally distant mind, and we're just there, sentenced to death.
It is unfortunately.
We waste away, thinking one day we'll hit that vine, we'll hit that vein.
The vein doesn't exist. There's no precious metal.
The vein was a lie to keep us working and miserable.
There is, unfortunately,
still too close, guys. It's still
too
close. If I misheard it, it is still way too close. They are not. That is not a good name couple. But yeah, the emotionally distant mine can continue to be its thing. Prowl is obviously better off without this Vulcan who cannot even respect the rank. What a horrible, like, ridiculous Vulcan. Just no. He's not. I'm not a fan of him. He's a bad.
Yeah, it's when he said lieutenant, it's commander now. Indeed. And I was like, fucking excuse me?
Yeah. Such a good, like...
You get back here and address him properly, young man!
Your ex who you cannot prove that you've grown and are better than too. Like, that's the worst. Because, like, normally when you break up with someone and you meet them later on, like, normally you're in a better place than you were when you broke up, if only because, like, when you broke up with them, you just broken up with somebody, and nobody's at their best when they've just broken up with somebody. But no, like, but when you see someone again, you hopefully are like, yeah, like, my life is better than it was when I was with you.
Also,
I'm doing great.
Yeah, particularly as described by Prowl, it was a fairly, like, I wouldn't say messy breakup, but it was like, it was really emotional, and particularly Prowl, it was messy. Like, you know, this whole thing. So if I was this guy, or if I had been in that situation, there's that almost compulsion to be like, look how much better I'm doing without you. And this guy just straight up gives it to Prowl on a silver platter. Like, I am still emotionally distant and also the worst. Here, have the moral high ground.
Yeah. We do not have to deal with Trill reassociation. This is the exact opposite of Trill reassociation. This is a Trill going, I don't want to associate with you.
No, fuck that noise.
You out of my past life. Get out. I would like Prowl to enter.
Please go back to Vulcan so I can ignore you.
No. I want Lizzo's good as hell.
Yes.
To play just as the backstory of Prowl walking past Cybeck until Cybeck learns to find an emotion, and that emotion is regret. Then
yes.
Let that one go. That is exactly what we want. For all of that. Okay. The final thing I believe on my list is Lakat.
Lakat and the rest of the
Oh, bless
junior senior
this small
staff.
child. I love her.
Oh.
She gets drunk, by which I mean she has a drink that is not going to get you drunk beyond,
Still-
like, tipsy.
Make you a bit loopy.
She's a little bit vulnerable to Solon, the ship's bartender. She is trying to be straightforward and honest, and, like, she expresses to him lots of her internal dialect. Like, she is trying to do that to be not Cardassian. She is working on being straightforward and open and communicative in a way that Cardassians, much like Romulans, aren't normally. And again, we have stuff like we mentioned before, that, like, not only did Tech stay in Starfleet because of Azri, like Lakat did too.
It wasn't even just a staying, it was a not leaving.
Yeah.
What I love about Azri is that eventually, by the end of the series, we're going to have about 50 people that were like, I tried to leave Starfleet, but Azri said, I don't want you to leave Starfleet. And it wasn't a question, so I stayed in Starfleet.
Yeah.
No, it's not, I don't want you. You're not leaving Starfleet.
Yeah. It's like, I think I'm going to leave Starfleet. No.
Here's a promotion.
I think I'm going to leave Starfleet. No, you're not. What? But I'm gonna. No, you're staying. Oh, okay, Mum.
And they just blink and then they're in the fucking chair on the ship without even realizing.
There's lots of really interesting stuff here. Like, I think one of the lines I just want to highlight is, like, what kind of person chooses to leave their family behind when they like them? Is one of those. I don't know what direction I should go at, but that is a whole kind of just,
That's a whole
voice is gonna come up again. Sorry, Faze. And Solon also, like, does a little bit of analysis. It kind of points out that Lakat has this problem backing down from a challenge, and it kind of is openly just like, that's gonna get you in trouble. Which I think, again, like, Lakat is getting a huge amount of good advice this episode,
Yes.
even if she doesn't internalize it for a little bit.
I love
She
her.
wants to start a party?
I also love the
such a
fact
terrible-
that
Excuse me.
I relate to Lakat on such a deep and profound level when she's like, I can't back down from a challenge, and Solus is like, really? Did I just say
You
Solus?
said Solus, you Dragon Age nerd.
Shut up. This is a bad time.
Bad.
But yes. And he's like, wow, this is like, he's like, I'm gonna get you another drink. She's like, yes, and he's like, no,
No, what are you doing?
no, stop that.
Also,
This was a test and you failed.
Yeah.
they're playing Dragon Age Inquisition again, so...
Again.
I do want to, like, I think it's
Listen.
important. Just, like,
Before we continue, I
Yeah.
do want to state, kind of, we know Solon is gender fluid. We're going to aim to use the pronouns used when in the episode.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
he, I believe.
It was he at
I
that
was
point
like,
in
he,
time.
him, I
It
believe,
was
this
he and they.
episode.
He, they, kind of interchangeably, but majority he.
I think they is their default pronoun, which they're
Yeah.
always kind
So
of.
we will kind of
But-
essentially just be going with
Whatever
the,
Eric says.
going with
yeah,
the, so whatever is referred to at the time, that's how we will be referring in
Yeah.
the
we
discussion.
We will do our best. Like, keep us honest, chat. I do want to say, like, just as kind of like final thing, like, Lakat is clearly hyped and very, like, energetic, and he's trying to start a party. And I want to just highlight, like, Dari forces Tech to go, which I think is really good. Like, Dari is obviously looking out for Tech,
So nice.
Dari is the mum friend.
despite being definitely junior to.
Yeah.
Your mum friend, like mum friend is not an age, it's an experience.
No, fair. But I want to contrast that with, like, Tech, who's obviously had trouble with Lakat recently, and is obviously working through it still, but has kind of decided to put that aside and move on with their relationship and their friendship. I want to contrast that with Vren.
Oh, my
Who-
boy. My
Like,
boy.
starts off going to the wrong place because they gave him bad directions, but then meets Exio and takes the opportunity to bail entirely. I have a lot of curiosity about that. Like, is it just that Vren doesn't like Klingons, as he expresses in the episode that he's not kind of comfortable with them because they want to relive a war that he wants to leave behind, which is perfectly valid. But I also just want to highlight, like, Lakat is not super nice to Vren.
Yeah. She's
I-
kind of the worst.
I
To
would
him.
not have, like, I would not object to Vren going, look, we're not really friends. We sit next to each other all day, and you spend most of your shift irritating me when you're bored.
Just snarking at me the
Because
whole
you're
fucking
bored.
time.
Yeah,
Like, that
and
is-
like snark is acceptable when it's like consensual snark.
Cheeky bants is not snark.
Yeah, it's like when snark is consensual, it becomes bants. Otherwise, it's just bullying.
Yeah, but I think and absolutely, like, you've got to have a certain level of friendship where you can kind of know and trust that everything is, like, understood to be okay between you. I don't think Vren and Lakat have that, and I think it's
I think
telling
Lakat
that-
thinks they do.
Yeah, it's telling that Lakat isn't enough of a draw to get Vren to come to the station. Like, that, like, Vren is consciously going, I don't want to do this. I can't do this. And that, like, I think there's a lot of that is because of the Klingons.
That's a whole package to unpack right there.
Yeah.
But there's a lot to unpack there, and I'm really interested to see what's going on.
I think the one thing for me in Vren, and it is relating back to this thing of, like, Klingons always want to relive the war, and him getting very uncomfortable around Klingons. I think currently Vren is, like, trying to find a better purpose in the Shackleton Expanse with his abilities and with his experience to navigate the eddies and navigate all of this. And there is just this constant, overwhelming reminders of the person he was.
Mm.
It's kind of really interesting because we have these parallels between Vren and Prahl, who both are running from who they were.
Mm.
And then
And it's-
handling it in very different ways.
Yeah, and I think it's curious because I think the person Prahl is running away from is not the person that is currently externally expressed. Like, Prahl has a good front, and that is not the person that they feel they lost. Whereas I think whoever Vren is truly is hidden under this specific hotshot pilot facade. Like, I don't think that's him. And I think that is much more likely to be the thing that the Klingons relate to, and that, like, if he has friends on the station from the war, that is the person they're looking to see, and that person doesn't exist for Vren anymore, or at least he's not willing to make that pretense. Because I think he definitely changed and suffered, and it's very curious.
So I would like to raise my hand in some stupid theories because that's my job here.
It is about that time.
I have a suspicion that Vren flew Klingon ships.
Interesting.
And was ordered to do things that were, in the situation of the Dominion War, acceptable, but outside of that, basically
yike.
war crimes.
Yeah,
Vren can have little a war crime as a treat.
it would be interesting.
Because I think it makes sense to me. His experience with Beta Quadrant space, his experience with Klingons, and also a little bit Romulans, and just the way that he engages with things with that kind of complete separation. There's clearly some trauma there. There's clearly something that needs to be dealt with. In the same way, Prahl, there's clearly trauma there. There's things that need to be dealt with. If only there was a counselor. Also, everyone is getting therapy, and that's great.
That is really good.
I love the fact that everybody's getting therapy. I
Very
love
good.
therapy. Therapy is good. Everybody on Earth should have therapy, even if they don't think they need a therapist. They need a therapist.
Yes.
It's just helpful for
Talking to a
sorting
neutral party.
out.
Just expressing your thoughts is good.
Have we discussed everything we would like to discuss? Have we?
I
reached
think so.
All right. So, this was an amazing episode. I'm
This
really
was.
proud. We have some logistical announcements. So next week,
Yes.
I will not be able to stream
Yes.
on Sunday because I am going to Australia for 6 weeks.
Okay, which means we will not be streaming next Sunday. I am not here.
Yes.
I am running a camp for some Girl Guides out in the middle of the forest, in the middle of nowhere. So I am not going to be I will be an emotionally unavailable man. I will just there will be no way to contact me, let alone
Physically
stream.
unavailable
Yeah.
man.
Yes.
So what we may need to do.
A physically unavailable boy. So if you wanted to stream with Kato, oh no, you're at fucking thingy. I was gonna say if you wanted to do it on Friday night, but you can't because you're at the Prince of Egypt.
We may be able to do
We
Saturday.
will have some discussions.
We will have some logistical discussions about what will happen next week.
Yes. keep tuned to the Twitter. We'll figure something out.
As you can tell, we're really unorganized and haven't actually discussed this at all together yet. But sorry, Kato.
Our Twitter is at azimuth_games.
Yes.
I am at Kato, aka Kato.
I am come follow me at Captain_Tiny for memes and hot spicy Dragon Age takes.
And I'm at Kung Fu Panzer on Twitter. And also just a quick teaser for you all. We're planning on launching a website soon. That's going to have some fun stuff on there, including stuff for this and stuff for some other projects. So keep tuned, and that will hopefully be up soon.
Yep. Most of the other projects are me, again, like I said earlier, sat in the corner and just chin-handsing at these two. For example, one time, I was on my sofa reading peer-reviewed journals for a project I was doing at work, and Mitch and Kato were sat at our dinner table writing a spreadsheet together.
We were indeed
and being very
writing a
excited.
spreadsheet.
We are such cool people.
Fucking love spreadsheet.
They're so good. Anyway, until next week, Mitch, what's the forecast for tomorrow?
The forecast for tomorrow. Which country?
Yeah, can you do US and UK tomorrow, and then Australia for next week?
Okay, cool. So Australia next week, UK tomorrow, US. Oh yeah, it's Clear Skies.
It's Clear Skies.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Close, guys.
All right. Thanks everyone. See you
Peace.
later.